there two Chinas? Well, there's two governments, both with China in their names. Since 1949, both mainland China's government, People's Republic of China or PRC, and Taiwan's government, Republic of China, have claimed validity as the legitimate and only China. China sees Taiwan as a breakaway province and says it will retake the territory by force if necessary. But Taiwan considers itself as a sovereign state with its own constitution and unlike China, with democratically elected leaders. Taiwan is home to 23 million people and the island just sits southeast of mainland China. Since 1949, they have had an independent government which was once a military dictatorship and has now become a multi-party democratic government. On the other hand, mainland China is home to 1.3 billion people wherein they are governed by the Communist Party of China. So the real questions are, how did we get here and which among the two is the real China? I'm Crescendo Dumbrique from Group 2, and to fully understand what's going on between them, I will tell you their brief history. Going back to the beginning, the first known settlers in Taiwan were Austronesian tribal people who are thought to have come from modern-day southern China. Taiwan seems to have first appeared in the Chinese records in 239 AD when an emperor of South China sent an expeditionary force of about 10,000 people to explore the area. This record is often cited by Beijing to back its territorial claim. Taiwan was colonized by the Dutch in the 17th century. Shortly afterwards, there was an influx of Hokulea people including Hakka immigrants from the Fujian and Guangdong provinces of China across the Taiwan Strait. In 1662, Zhang Chenggong, a loyalist from China's Ming Dynasty, who had lost control of China in 1644, defeated the Dutch and established base operations in the island of Taiwan. His forces were later defeated by China's Qing Dynasty in 1683, and parts of Taiwan became increasingly integrated into the Qing Empire. In 1895, Japan won the First Sino-Japanese War, and the China's Qing government had to cede or hand over Taiwan to Japan. After World War II, Japan surrendered and handed back Taiwan to China. The Republic of China, known as Kuomintang, led by Chiang Kai-shek, began ruling Taiwan with the consent of its allies, US and the UK. However, a civil war broke out in China within the next few years. In 1945, after the World War II ended, the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, finally succeeded in overthrowing the Nanjing-based ROC nationalist government led by Chiang Kai-shek. As a result, Chiang Kai-shek, with the remnants of his Kuomintang or supporters, fled to Taiwan in 1949 and made Taipei their new capital. Years later, Chiang Kai-shek's son, Chiang Ching-kuo, began allowing the process of democratization in Taiwan. This paved the way for President Lee Teng-hui, Taiwan's father of democracy, who led constitutional changes towards a more democratic political layout, which eventually led to the election of the island's first non-Kuomintang president, Chen Shui-bian, in 2000. The People's Republic of China, PRC, established its capital in Beijing, and the Republic of China, ROC, lost its UN seat to the PRC in 1971. Therefore, mainland China officially holds the title of China, but many countries have still unofficial ties with Taiwan. And so, we arrive at the nation's ambiguous state. As of April 2022, only 13 countries have officially recognized Taiwan as a sovereign country. Meanwhile, most of the international community and the United Nations have chosen to maintain relations with Beijing and thus consider China as the legal custodian of the island of Taiwan.
And now that we have a basic understanding of how the dispute between China and Taiwan began, the next question to be discussed and answered is, what about the recent hostility that is happening? Let's go back first to the late 1980s. In the 1980s, relations between China and Taiwan began to improve. China proposed the one nation, two systems approach in which Taiwan would be granted extensive autonomy in exchange for accepting Chinese reunification. This system was established in Hong Kong to be used as something of a showcase to entice Taiwanese people back to the mainland. In China's view, Taiwan is part of China's sovereign territory. Beijing claims that there is only one China, and Taiwan is a part of it. It considers the People's Republic of China, or China, to be the only China's sole legitimate government. This concept is also known as the One China concept. It advocates Taiwan, or the Taiwanese people, to unify or have an ultimate unification with the mainland. Taiwan turned down the offer, although it did ease restrictions on Chinese visitors and investment. It also declared the mainland's conflict with the People's Republic of China to be concluded in 1991. There were also limited discussions between the two sides and official representatives, while government-to-government contacts were not possible due to Beijing's claim that Taiwan's Republic of China's government is illegitimate, because in what was discussed earlier, when the Chinese Civil War broke out after the end of World War II, the communists won and prevailed on the mainland, which is why the nationalists fled to Taiwan. In China's opinion, Taiwan's succession is the outcome of an unfinished civil war. Beijing was alarmed when Taiwan chose Chen Shui-bian as president in 2000. Chen Shui was a supporter of Taiwan's independence from China, and when Mr. Chen was re-elected in 2004, China issued an anti-succession law. China was frightened with the idea that Mr. Chen Shui was the elected president, especially that Mr. Chen is open about his support for independence of Taiwan. Anti-succession law, on the other hand, is a law declaring China's right to use non-peaceful approach against Taiwan if it tried to separate or secede from the country. Mr. Chen was then replaced by Ma Ying-jeou, who attempted to strengthen relations with China through economic accords shortly after winning the government in 2008. Because for Ma Ying-jeou, strengthening the relations of Taiwan and China through economic approach could lessen the possibility of them attacking the country. 8 years later, year 2016, Taiwan's current president, Tsai Ing-wen, was elected. She is the leader of the Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP. This party advocates for formal independence from China. Tsai Ing-wen is the first female president of Taiwan. Tsai advocates and supports secure solid ties between Taiwan and the United States. And in early December 2016, after Mr. Donald Trump won the US election, Tsai had an unprecedented phone chat with President-elect Trump. This was the first time that the President of Republic of China, or Taiwan, spoke with the President of the United States since 1979, which is why it was considered as an unprecedented phone chat. She later stated that no big policy change had occurred. Because of this, cross-strait ties worsened or deteriorated under Ms. Tsai's term. Despite their lack of official connections, the US has vowed to provide Taiwan with defensive weapons. US also stated that any invasion by China would raise grave alarm. It said that the Republic of China, or Taiwan, and the United States have always had a strong partnership built on the foundation of cooperation and trust. However, China was enraged by this positive relationship between Taiwan and the United States. China increased its pressure on overseas corporations throughout 2018, where they required these international companies to declare Taiwan as a part of China on their websites. China also threatened to ban these corporations from doing business with them if they don't comply on what they want. Tsai Ing-wen revealed her intention to run for president again in 2020 in an interview with CNN last February 2019. Fortunately, Ms. Tsai won and was re-elected in 2020. By that time, months of violence had erupted in Hong Kong, with people rallying against the mainland's growing power. This issue had been going for quite long, as Beijing has restricted Hong Kong's freedom in recent years, sparking large rallies and protests in the city. And in 2020, China passed a national security law in Hong Kong, which gave China new power to penalize critics and punish these protesters. Beijing has said that Hong Kong should respect and preserve the rights and freedom while maintaining the national security. But many fear that this law would only limit Hong Kong's freedoms, affecting the lives of these Hong Kong residents. They interpreted the law as another proof of Beijing's growing dominance in the territory. Meanwhile, the United States has increased its outreach to Taiwan, assuring Taipei of its unwavering support. For decades, the US has tried to strike a careful balance between backing Taiwan and avoiding a confrontation with China through its policy of strategic ambiguity. But last September, Washington sent the highest-ranking State Department official to visit the island. Beijing slammed the meeting, advising the US not to give any misleading signals to pro-Taiwan independence group in order to avoid possible serious harm to China-US ties. Because for China, US has been playing games with China over the Taiwan Strait, perceiving it as a key or their advantage to make a way of the China-US strategic competition. China conducted a live-fire military drill in the strait that separates the island from the mainland during this controversial visit. Taiwan claimed a major invasion by Chinese airplanes over 2 days in the first few days of Mr. Biden's presidency. Then on April 12, the Taiwanese government said that China had flown the largest number of military jets into its air defense zone in a year. It was considered to be one among the largest incursions into Taiwan's air defense zone. As a result, the chief of the Pentagon's Indo-Pacific Command warned that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is much closer to us than most think. Taiwan, like Ukraine, is not an official ally of the United States. Despite Biden's repeated statements to the contrary, the US has made no promise to use force to safeguard Taiwan. However, President Joe Biden appears to be against the idea because he stated multiple times that the US would defend Taiwan if China tries to attack them. Even this year, President Joe Biden's administration has said its commitment to Taiwan is rock solid. And now that we know the recent hostility that is happening between Taiwan and China, let us now try to answer the question, who recognizes Taiwan?
So, who recognizes Taiwan? There's still a confusion and disagreement about what Taiwan is. For China, they consider Taiwan as their breakaway province, and it has vowed to retake by force if necessary. For Taiwan leaders, argues that they are a sovereign state, while in fact, Taiwan has its own constitutions, democratically elected leaders, and about 300,000 active troops in its armed forces. Since then, yung number of countries na nire-recognize yung ROC government diplomatically has drastically fallen to about 15. Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize are relatively small islands and pinaniwalaan ng mga ito na they are receiving financial support from Taiwan. US supported ROC government diplomatically for 3 decades hanggang eventually nag-switch ito to not support their independence from 1979, ending their 3-decade support from 1949. So given na may malaking differences between these two positions, other countries seems to be contented or happy between this current ambiguity. As on the business matters side, like international companies has been forced out by China, they must include on their website that Taiwan is a part or province of China. Dahil kapag hindi ito ginawa ng isang international company, China might just block business matters with them. It just proves that China is a very dominant country over Taiwan by force. Kahit na Taiwan has all of its virtual characteristics of an individual or independent state, their legal status remains unclear.
How much of an issue is independence in Taiwan? We can answer this question by having two variables. It can be political or it can be economic. Let's first discuss political. Since Ms. Chai won the election in 2016, China increased its employment of various forces or threats to wear down Taiwan. Its political agenda is to prompt the people of Taiwan to choose unification with mainland China. To that bait or end, China increased its frequency and scale of armed forces such as fighter jets, patrol, surveillance aircraft, and warships over and around the Strait of Taiwan to show force. In addition to the tactics or mechanism of China, they also try to disseminate false information during the elections in 2018 and continuously indulge the country with disinformation. China also wanted to increase its control over Taiwanese media outlets. In the 2020 election, China spread disinformation in an effort to damage Ms. Chai and boost KMT's presidential candidate. It is one of their last resorts in destroying people's trust in Taiwan's political system. However, Ms. Chai won a record-breaking 8.2 million votes, which served as a rebuke of Beijing. So far, the Taiwan independence movement is a political movement that advocates the formal declaration of an independent and sovereign Taiwanese state. As opposed to the status quo of two Chinas or Chinese unification, currently Taiwan's political status remains ambiguous, meaning to say, it can be more interpretation or double meaning of independence. China claims that Taiwan is a province of the People's Republic of China. Meanwhile, Taiwan is currently under the control of the Republic of China. The current Tsai Ing-wen administration of the ROC maintains that Taiwan is already an independent country as the ROC, and thus does not push for any sort of formal independence. The next variable to be discussed is economic. What is Taiwan's economic state? Taiwan's economy remains reliant or dependent on trade with China. It is Taiwan's largest trading partner. However, the economic relationship has experienced disruptions in recent years, partly due to Beijing's pressure on the island and the fact of its over-reliance on trade with China. According to BBC News, Taiwanese companies have invested about $60 billion in China, and up to 1 million Taiwanese people now live in China, which many running Taiwanese factories. Under President Ma, who was in office from 2008 to 2016, Taiwan signed more than 20 pacts with the People's Republic of China, including the 2010 Cross-Straits Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement or PDF, in which they agreed to lift barriers to trade. China and Taiwan resumed direct sea, air, and mail links that had been banned for decades. They also agreed to allow banks, insurers, and other financial service providers to work in both markets. This agreement becomes controversial, which sparked the Sunflower Movement in 2014, where Taiwanese people occupied Taiwan's parliament protesting against China's growing influence over Taiwan. They stand and say no to China and no more annexation. Nevertheless, according to Taiwan's official government website, Taiwan was the world's 15th largest exporter of merchandise in 2020. It is also one of the largest holders of foreign exchange reserves as of December 2020. To summarize, factors that could influence the China-Taiwan relationship should be determined by the people from both sides negotiating in a peaceful way. However, this could hardly happen based on the state of the global political and economic environment that the two countries have. First, China's image to the world must be changed. If China cannot build a friendly and trustworthy image for its neighboring countries like Taiwan and earn the respect of the Taiwanese people, then it will be very difficult for China to make any progress toward improving its relationship with Taiwan. Second, this could also affect the relationship between China and US. A competition between two big countries could influence the relationship between China and Taiwan because the US government is highly considered a big brother that the Taiwan government always counts on. As a reflection, hopefully the tension between China and Taiwan will come at ease in a peaceful and cooperative manner, since this should be the main goal of every country, and set aside the political agenda of these political leaders and prioritize their people's interests instead.